I'll start by introducing our moderator. Our moderator is the former head of Savills Residential Global Consultancy. He is a trusted advisor. Today, he is the founder and the principal driving force behind Global Branded Residences. He is a big thinker and ideally positioned to lead a discussion around the future of branded living and where that will take us, where it'll take operators, where it'll take investors, and the brands themselves. So it's my pleasure to introduce our friend, Riyan Itani.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks everybody for joining us for this last panel session at the forum. We're going to be looking at some of the future shapes and forms that branded residences could take. And before we start, I just want to say how refreshing this is to be at a panel and at a session where we as branded residential consultants and operators and professionals are not a sideshow. We can really lean into this and we're the focus for once. So well done to the organizers and we're all very excited. So what a day it's been, what an afternoon it's been. We've heard so much insights from the market. We've heard about the kind of trends which are going to go forward and best practices and plenty of food for thought for the future of branded residences. I think some of the key trends which have come out today include the rise of standalone developments, the diversification away from luxury, the continued participation of non-hospitality brands, and of course the role that innovative architecture and technology, in particular AI, have to play in the future. So today I'm honored and so pleased to be joined by some of the true thought leaders in this space, from the worlds of architecture, from the worlds of development, from the world of fashion and design, and from the worlds of technology. So we're going to try to have a session that is a bit broader, where we get to do some speculation and we get to do some forward thinking. So without further ado, if we can welcome our panel to the stage and we'll move on to introductions. Okay, well, let's start off with some introductions going down the line in terms of who you are, your roles, and your particular interest in branded residences at the moment. I don't think that's on.
Good that we're going to talk about technology because great when it works. My name is Imran Changezi. I head up the hospitality development for Diriyah company in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. My portfolio includes hotel, resorts, and branded residences across the master plans that we have.
I'm Paolo Righi. I'm the CEO of the Karl Lagerfeld Fashion House since about 14 years. I'm definitely the odd kid on the block here, I guess, also because we are pretty new to the residential and the hospitality developments, but we see this as an important part also of the future of our fashion house.
Do we need one of those? Oh no, I think we're already connected. Hi, I'm Bernardo Fort-Brescia. I'm one of the founders of Arquitectonica. We are an architectural firm, landscape architecture and architecture. We are based in Miami, Florida, but we have offices throughout the world, 11 offices, most continents, all continents, and including here. And we design hotels and branded residences, and some, they used to be together, and now they happen independently. And we do this for most of the brands out there in the world.
Hi everyone, my name is Heneghan. I was the UK government's Chief Digital Communicator up until last year. I've now run a company called the Future Communicator, where we look at holistically what's happening, particularly communications marketing, but how it applies in different sectors. And since I've been speaking to Jeff and the team, I've been doing a deep dive on branded residence and looking to see where the potential is for this. So delighted to be here.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Imran, let's start with you. You have the, let's say, the sensitive task at the Diriyah company to balance a huge amount of history and a huge amount of culture in your site with forward-looking hospitality and branded residential. And I know that branded residences and sustainability is two very important verticals in your strategy. It'd be great to understand how you are, on a day-to-day basis, balancing those two, what could be seen as conflicting forces.
Well, thank you, Riyan. I think we're very fortunate in Diriyah, first of all, that our mandate was to create I would call it a city, really, because the 14 square kilometer master plan that we're doing between Diriyah 1 and 2 alone, just for your relevance purpose, that's the size of Geneva City, basically, and it's in the middle of Riyadh. So our mandate was to, first of all, protect the heritage, enhance the cultural aspect, pay tribute to the very particular architectural style which belongs to that region, Najd, which is the central Saudi Arabia. So we were there to resurrect that architecture that had evolved over the centuries. So the vernacularity of that architecture is very specific. It's a very peculiar architecture, and it's very local to that area. So that's just setting the scene. That was our first sort of a pillar, that we need to make sure that we're paying homage to that Najdi architecture. And Najdi architecture comes with its own amazing characteristics, which luckily plugs very well into sustainability aspect that you mentioned. And to those of you who are not very familiar with that, just a couple of highlights of that architectural style, and for our architectural friends over here as well, is that it has evolved over centuries, this architectural style, the Najdi architectural style. Some of the key aspects of that are sustainability, in effect, that first of all is not a high rise. It can never be above G+1, G+2. So that's our first constraint when we are developing and designing that. Secondly, we have to respect the vernacularity in a way that there are passive ventilations that we have to, which is great for sustainability, that we don't have to overcool it, we don't have to think about bringing all the technologies and making sure that, oh, is it good enough or not? But we were rather stretched from an architectural and design perspective to bring that centuries old, and remember, before the invention of all the air conditions and everything, people have lived in this region, harsh climate, weather, and everything else. So we borrowed those principles of how these architectural styles have evolved, and that involves introduction of courtyards as a central element. That includes narrow passageways in between, we call sikas, for example, in Arabic, in order to protect it from the sun, shade, and everything else. So naturally, combining those two elements, answering your question, Riyan, is that we were lucky, and that's why I mentioned at the start of the conversation, that we were there to protect and reintroduce that architectural style into hotels and branded residences. So our constraints were quite clearly laid out. And then we were able to bring those sustainable concepts and bring it a fresh breath of air into it by combining it with smart city underneath. And all the, and we'll come to that point later on probably, but just concluding answer to your question, these were the two elements that we were combining, paying homage to the historic aspect of what Najdi architecture stands for, introducing it to the world, making it from a residence or branded residence perspective, a livable, breathable, sustainable space for people to enjoy.
Just out of interest, were the architects who were involved or who became involved, did they see that as a positive challenge, as an exciting thing, or was there a lot of tension in making that work?
Funny that you asked that question, because there were two particular individuals, and I mean, being on a course platform, I think I had a very interesting conversation with Alan Faina, who is known for his, quite interesting, very mature, bold kind of themes and colors coming out, red being the favorite. And so we had to really go into what we call immersion session. So we had to conduct those informative sessions for him. And there was another very famous fashion icon everybody knows, very well respected, Mr. Giorgio Armani. We had to have lengthy conversations about what do you mean you want me to restrict and constrain to the architecture. There we ask a creative person to restrict and constrain. So yes, you're absolutely right. We had to have a lot of educational, immersive conversations. And result, and that was 5 years ago, and result of what we're seeing now and what you will see as coming through is just stunning. It's just pure, beautiful work.
And very, very unique in modern day branded residential architecture, which is fascinating how something that has its roots in history can feel so new and so different. Talking of architecture, Bernardo, Arquitectonica has been at the cutting edge of branded residential architecture and design for many, many years. And you have worked on a true list of different brands from hotelier to non-hotelier. I'm going to just consult my notes because the list is quite long. Ritz-Carlton, SLS, Hyde, Edition, St. Regis, W, The Standard, Rosewood, and then Mr. C, Cipriani, Fendi, and Baccarat, and I'm sure I've missed loads of them. What would be great to know is over the years, how have you seen the design and the, let's say, the architectural language of branded residences evolve? And what are the key driving forces that are shaping the architecture of this product from an investment perspective, from a end user perspective, or indeed direct brand perspective?
Well, it's peculiar because branding only applies to certain places, where the consumer can't evaluate himself or herself. They don't know the place, they don't know what's the right location, they don't know what's the right product, and it's a guidance almost that they trust that the brand must have evaluated and made a decision that was appropriate to the place, like, for example, what you described, where you are, that brand listened and adjusted, and they trust that the brand made the right decision for them. And I mean, there are places where the brand is the street, Park Avenue, or Central Park, you don't need, and there are other places where there are people moving from elsewhere, and, nowadays, even though people buy for their own consumption and for their own use, they always think in the back of their mind they're also investing. Like they can't reject the notion that someday, what if I have to sell? And the brand gives them that assurance. I think the challenge is how do you reflect the personality of that brand? And the bigger challenge is product differentiation. I mean, there's a point when they could all be looking the same, So there's so many brands, and how can architecture and design and philosophy, including, for example, a resilient and sustainable philosophy or whatever, maybe it's defining that brand. And yes, of course, aesthetics may play a role, but architecture is not just about how it looks, it's content. What's inside? What is it that it contains? And therefore, how can a brand project to the public a content that is relevant to the brand and doesn't blend with everybody else's content? It is it's easier to blend design or differentiate design, but content is a really difficult thing. And we struggle in the discussions with brands how to guide them into or give us or dialogue about what is it really that you should be representing in every way, including social purpose and environmental purpose, responsibility, and other things, And that's I'll give you a little bit of what goes through our mind with these brands that occur. As I said, there's not every city has a defining street or defining geography or defining place. There are cities Singapore Orchard Road, I mean, or as I mentioned in New York, and their Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. I mean, but not everybody has a defining place, and the brand is a way of establishing an anchor and a reason to go there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that often surprises my clients is that the brand doesn't design the building. They're not there to design the building, and actually that inspiration in many ways needs to come from the developer, from their architectural team. When you're dealing with a hospitality brand versus a non-hospitality brand, do you see a difference in internal programming and function that is materially different?
Well, let's think of the reason to choose a brand. Generally, hospitality brand means that you're going to have quasi-hotel service, that's a concierge service, let's call it, hospitality service, that you're going to have more than just press the elevator and go to your unit. It's a little bit more. And mind you, the buyers are analytical. They also want to know how much does that cost to run, okay? Is that, as time has gone by, they learned. But having said that, hospitality implies that. But for example, I did Fendi. It may not imply service, but it implies style, sophistication. It means good taste. So for some people, that is more important as far as their identity is concerned than service. And for others, service is, they say, why, who cares that it's a fashion brand? Tell me what's that other layer that is service. And there are some other brands that are other types that are in the marketplace, all kinds of products. But I'm identifying the two dominant ones because there are two factors that come into play with those two. But you probably can remind me of other newcomers that are not fashion but if I had to tell you one that is new, because the world has such a foodie culture now that even the United States, that wasn't really a foodie culture, it has a foodie culture, at least in major cities, like Miami, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. It is restaurants. And for the first time, for example, we're doing a Cipriani Tower, and that's, you think food. You're not thinking anything. Probably that's a primary thought, right?
Absolutely.
And yet that is another newcomer in the world that is food and beverage. And I think that's one other category.
Yeah, and actually what's really interesting, and Paolo, I'm going to come on to you in a second, but though that specific category of food or restaurants dominated at the moment by Cipriani and Nobu in particular.
Correct.
Interestingly, they're one of the only brands that straddles the non-hospitality brand that is very much focused on hospitality. In fact, they both only recently sort of quietly announced that they're interested in standalone properties without a hotel in place, which brings us to you, Paolo. I think one of the first things I wanted to ask, and it's a little bit, let's say, off script, is I don't think anyone could ignore the kind of message that we've heard today about the lack of value addition or the lack of validity of a non-hospitality brand in the sector. And very interesting to hear Bernardo mention, which I think is true, that in certain markets, brands have a different resonance, where a fashion brand or a design brand or a food brand is going to be much more marketable and of interest to the buying market compared to a traditional hospitality brand. Servicing aside, because servicing can be achieved through fantastic third-party operators or indeed strategic tie-ups with hotel brands. For Karl Lagerfeld, which is a famous brand for innovation, for passion for form, tell us first of all how the transition into branded residences came about, and how does that continue the legacy of Karl in terms of his passion for design and architecture?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you speak about a transition, it was exactly a transition. We basically, when Karl passed in 2019, we became the sole custodians of his legacy, the only house that carries his name at the doorbell, not Chanel and Fendi. It also meant that we had to look into the plethora of interests and activities that Karl was invested in and that he was driving forward. And it was photography, it was literature, places to go, music, of course also fashion, but also a great interest in architecture. And so he has been developing several private residential projects. He also started with us a hospitality project still when he was alive that we then took into fruition, a beautiful hotel in Macau. But for us, it was very clear in order to take his legacy into the future, it can't be only a focus on the fashion house, but it has to be really all the different touch points and points of interest that Karl engaged with and to take those into the future. So that was a natural evolution, so to say, and was also not being seen as awkward. So basically, it rather came to us than we were looking for. It was very, very natural. That's one element to it. The other element to it is, I would say, is not so specific to Karl Lagerfeld, but I think more a need within our industry to really think about how do you connect with your consumer in a very relevant way in the different points of their lives, in their different moments of enjoyment. It is not so much about selling a product with a brand name on it, a t-shirt, let's say it, and that's not what people make feel good about it, but they want to indulge and be invited in a world, in a feel that brings them, for a moment at least, to a different place. And as such, you have to think about different touch points that go away from the sole moment of selling a product. And that is also, I think, very much transported through the habitats, the places where you live and where you find yourself, and therefore represent a great moment also for our industry to have a broader possibility to engage with the consumer and in a relevant and meaningful way.
Tell us a little bit about the Macau hotel experience in the sense of your custodianship of the service that came alongside your brand.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it has two layers to it. You mentioned before, there's the service layer, and then there's the layer of how you make people feel beyond the service, but the world they want to indulge with. And you know, a reference point I made is about Karl, his different points of interest. He was so literate. He had about 300,000 books. If you go into the Macau hotel, the first thing you will see at the reception is a tremendous library, but it's not just a library, but it basically has all the books in that library that Karl had in his library in 7L. So if you want to really indulge in what were the points of interest of life in Karl's life, you go to that library, you find it there. But when it then comes to the whole service aspect, we have with the partner in Macau, with basically the whole family, an amazing partner that we have been working with on a very luxurious standard of services and have been able to transport that. That's amazing. But that is almost a kind of a standalone situation where you have got a partner, not a cookie cutter approach, but really a bespoke situation that you deal with, which then poses the question is like, yeah, if you want to multiply it, how do you go about it? And that is an answer that we still have to find. And that is where we have to find, of course, a partner that can create that vision together with us and bring it forward.
Peter, as an expert in AI integration into various industries, you specialize in helping organizations understand AI and how to leverage it to the fullest. Where do you see AI fitting into not only the broader hospitality industry, but maybe specifically branded residences?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is everywhere, literally every part of the ecosystem. So from choosing the location, you can, if you use big data, you can find the best locations. When you're the planning process, you can use automation to help you do it quicker and more effective. In the architecture space, if you get an amazing architect working with the AI tools, there's so much you can do quicker. You can make changes rapidly. The sales, hyper-personalization of, you will have heard the phrase hyper-personalization of within different examples today. I think the branded residence space is probably of all the places where you can get really hyper-personal because you're selling a higher value product. You can learn more about the individual and then you can target them with the right messaging, whether it's through advertising, it's in real-time spaces. But then there's opportunities when you've built the residence. It's about the maintenance, making sure that you're maintaining it more effectively rather than it become an emergency and then having to fix the problems. And then the one area that I'm probably most excited is once you've moved in, imagine having an augmented concierge who's able to speak multiple languages because AI enables it, or learns everything about the people who live in the residence. There's so much potential. And for me, I would say if you're investing in branded residence, I'd be looking at every step of the process and saying, is there an AI solution that could help us get there quicker?
And at the end of the day, and in many ways, this is about selling real estate. And talking of that hyper-personalization, what are the kind of ways in which AI can help to make the sales and marketing process more efficient?
I mean, it's utterly incredible. There's a new model from OpenAI called ChatGPT 0.1, and it's the closest thing I've seen to human reasoning. So in the past, we looked at AI and we thought it would do the kind of lesser manual type work. Now it's almost like up to a level of a consultant, almost to that level. So if you have an excellent consultant and you have the technology working together, there's so much potential there. So when you're doing your marketing, you can really focus in on developing the absolute perfect content for that individual person, or you can look at the data and figure it out. So there's huge potential in that. And we certainly find, I mean, anybody in this room, I could teach them how to create personas in 15 minutes of the types of people you would want to, who you'd be selling to. It's that quick in a way that you could never have done that before. So I think it's incredibly powerful, and we're really at the beginning of this. So in a year's time, these models will be twice as powerful as they are now. So there's so much to play with.
Yeah. Now, incredibly, we're getting short of time. Talking of future and future thinking, I want to pose you all a question, which was, we have seen branded residential residences, we've seen branded super yachts, we've seen branded aeroplanes, we've even seen some underwater branded properties here in Dubai coming onto the market. Thinking outside the box, is there either an incarnation, a physical incarnation of branded residences or branded real estate that you can think of, or indeed a market segment that you perhaps are surprised not to see in the industry at the moment? Bernardo, maybe if I start with you.
Well, I first want to segue one little aspect of branding and architecture, how they relate, and I want to relate it to the sustainable aspect because, well, in certain locations like Florida or San Francisco, I mean, where between the ocean and the Everglades, the land is very valuable. So the more you can not invade nature, that's why there's concentration of development. You're trying to limit the footprint of the building. But having said that, one of the tasks of the designers are to train the people who deal with the buyer and who explain a project to the buyer. For example, in the Fendi building, the building balconies form like a weave, like a fabric. But we also explain to them that's casting shadow on the glass, protecting from radiant heat, that if there's a torrential rain, there's no water penetration, no mold, that there's outdoor living as well as indoor living, that you can feel the breezes, and you explain the environmental aspects of the design beyond just the look, because I think we live in an era where people are very informed, they read, they know, and you can never underestimate the public's knowledge, And with AI, now we can actually give them statistical, real information about what the energy savings, really give them a narrative, of what they're buying into in terms of future value of what they own, that is not a superficial design, that is not just I like it, which is not a good word, It has to be beyond I like it, has to have substance, It is, and that is what we try to do. We actually have courses for the salespeople about these kind of things, so that they're able to explain to the buyer, and buyers really are attracted to this. Now, to your question, which I didn't answer, which was, remind me.
Which was, if there was a brand segment that you haven't seen in our industry, either an individual brand or a segment of the market which you are surprised that isn't existent.
I think any day there will be, we're working on it, so a brand about defining the workplace, not just defining where you live, but also
so branded offices,
where you
which
work.
we sort of touched on a little bit
and
earlier.
that kind of services when you go to work, there's similar to what you see in terms of the branded residence, and I think that may be happening, I also think that there's other. I think the primary brand types that we've heard, like fashion and style, or for that matter, responsible design, for example, could be like what you described, could someday become a value of a brand that represents certain principles.
That represents that type of responsibility or response.
Yeah, where there are people, there's a segment of the population that is attracted to that as well, not just to style.
Imran, any thoughts on what you would love to see in Diriyah that isn't there at the moment?
I'm not sure about what I'm going to say what I would love to see in Diriyah, but since your question was brought into what do you else see elsewhere, I think we've got pretty much everybody we wanted in Diriyah is already there. But you've seen watches turn into branded resi, you've seen retail apparel turn into it, you've seen automobile turn into it. I mean, with the kind of trend that we've been seeing over the last 10, 15 years, where personalities have gone into it. I mean, not just the fashion personalities, you're talking about sports personalities. I think Tiger Woods tried to do it, but it didn't go further.
Yeah, Rafa Nadal
is doing his academy, and Djokovic wants to do as well. Somebody recently mentioned to me that, Nike or even Apple, I'm like, Apple? But somebody said, I really like the interior of their showroom. I would like to have a design. So I'm like, I don't think there's any limit to it, but I guess the point would be, from a developer's perspective, trust me, we get so many pitches every day, every other day, saying, what about this brand, what about this brand? We can turn into whatever you want. And our answer has been quite consistent. It's not about whatever we want. It's about, first of all, staying true to the integrity of what we represent in Diriyah, but also sparing a thought and a moment for that customer who's going to buy. It's not just about flooding a brand in front of their eyes, but more a brand that can provide maximum dimensions of that taste, elegance, service combined together, and the value that you're protecting on your asset, right?
Pier Paolo?
Strangely or not strangely enough, pretty much in the same direction. My answer, I've worked 20 years in the sports industry, 10 years with Nike, and the first thing I thought, if you really kind of want to create something special where you also create a community and get a certain dynamic about a certain area of interest, I think sports, and I would then come up with the major brand in the world, Nike, I would definitely see in that field.
Right. Yeah. Peter, finally?
Just a very quick one, and it touches on a lot of what you just said. I can see the coming together of the brands, like you mentioned Karl and his library, and the individual. So we're all brands, and if you buy a residence, there's this sense that you feel that you represent yourself as a brand. in a sense. So there'll be a kind of a merging, not of the external architecture, but within the residents themselves, which will take the best of the brand and the best of the individual and combine them in some way. I think that's probably what will happen more.
And I guess that will also address that identity or product or personality with that servicing requirement, which is clearly such a big part of the value driver.
You've seen that already in, like, Nike have been creating fashion with sports stars, which is bespoke to that sports star. It's only a matter of time before it goes from fashion into branded resonance.
Bernardo, I can see you're itching to.
I think if there's going to be a sports brand,
we've got any time for Q&A?
I just want one sentence here. If it's going to be a sports brand, it has to translate into some form of wellness values.
Sure.
Because it can't just be because of a swoosh. It has to be because there's some other content beyond just the name.
And we're seeing that sports and wellness focus coming in through the hospitality world as well, aren't we? Through things like Cyro and Equinox and other brands which have taken that on. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Let's see if we've got any questions from the audience to round it up. Chris, I can see, hand straight up.
Thanks, Riyan. I know we've talked about this before, but one of the trends that I've written about and we've discussed is the 55 plus audience. I think that there is a very big opportunity for this segment, which is massively growing from the baby boomers. They are wealthy, but above all, they're extremely active. And I suspect that the opportunities to develop branded environments catering specifically for this, we've started to see a couple appearing in the States, which sold out very quickly at very high prices. And I suspect that that will then extend into the whole longevity, not just wellness, but actually longevity, where the environment, the nutrition, and on-site medical care will become much more prevalent.
Yeah, I think that's an obvious extension of what we're seeing now. When we talk about lifestyle, it's not just lifestyle when you're young and rich, it's also lifestyle when you need help and you need to make sure that you can continue that lifestyle. Any other questions for our panel? No? Everyone's ready for a nice drink at the reception. Well, can we please all thank our fantastic panel for their contribution today.
By the way, there's a longevity brand coming on. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
Imran, thank you very much. Paolo, thank you very much. Bernardo, thank you very much. Okay, very quickly, everyone. Just want to wrap here. First of all, big thank you to our panelists. I think that was exactly the right note to end on. This was a very full day. I think we used the metaphor of ultramarathon, and it felt a little bit like that. But very, very interesting. So first of all, it's a dynamic space. It's a fast-moving space. It's a space that was occupied for many years by just a handful of brands. That's no longer the case. This is a deeply competitive space. And I think from the last panel, what I take away from the last panel is that in many respects, we're just starting to scratch the surface. There's opportunities for what we do in a branded residential space to expand into new categories. We touched on that. There's opportunities for technology to do what Peter touched on in terms of hyper-personalization. There are 200 brands available to developers right now. And from the operator perspective, one of the things that we have to be very mindful of is that this is a dynamic space. It's one that we need to continue to focus on evolution of service offerings, collaboration with architects and designers to evolve physical design, and it's going to remain very competitive. We're going to wrap up, for those of us who can make it, at So Uptown Dubai. If you're interested in seeing the residential product there, you're more than welcome to. There will be cocktails and mocktails served on the 34th floor. And if I forget to remind everyone, Tanya will be very frustrated with me. There are buses waiting outside, I believe, right now for anyone that would take that. Of course, it's about a 20-minute, maybe 30-minute, depending on traffic. Uberite as well. But I want to end by thanking, first of all, the bench, incredible collaborators without whom this would be not possible. I also want to thank our moderators, our speakers, our guests who joined us from very near and in some cases from very far, and all of those of us who were able to join in the room. These projects, and without the expertise in the room, that cross collaboration, all that multifunctional expertise across a whole host of disciplines, these projects simply would not be possible. So thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.